Welcome to another episode of Through the Glass. I'm your host, me. Appreciate if you've been digging the episodes. As always, I appreciate the feedback and constructive criticism. Keep it coming. Appreciate that very much. Today, I'm excited to have my friend. You've probably heard him on air, on the airwaves, or the digital airwaves, I should say. Lazlo, the owner and founder of BlowUpRadio and WhereNJRockLives. Lazlo, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for inviting me, Michael. And still inviting me again after, I initially turned it down because I wasn't vaccinated yet.
I don't hear no. I'm like, well, I'm just going to ask you again. I'm what they call a nag or a scutch. My mom used to call it a scutch. I don't know if that's like Italian-American parlance. Like, I don't know what that is. Do you know the term scutch?
I've heard the term.
It might mean other things, too. So I might be, maybe she meant something else. But
I've heard it in the same way you hear pain in the ass.
Yeah, I am a scutch. Yup. Whichever way you look at it. So, yeah, you were concerned, rightfully so, just, everything that's going on with COVID. You wanted to wait until you were fully vaccinated. I said, well, if you don't know, at home, we are completely isolated. We're in two different rooms. We run a very tight COVID ship here at the Lake House Recording Studios. However, some people need to take it extra careful for themselves or for others around them. Please keep that in mind. It's not just about you people. So now you're in the game. You said This is the first time you've really left the house except for like a quickie run or a doctor's visit. Is that correct?
Quickie run. It sounds like I'm going out to cheat on my wife, which I would never do. Oh, I should look at the camera when I say that. I would never do that.
Not quickly. You would take your time. It would be more like a long weekend.
I thought I was going to be the one that got silly first because I'm going to tell you, because there is the glass partition between us, I want so badly to reenact the end of Wrath of Khan right now and go up and go, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, Jim.
Oh my, we're getting deep. We got real deep, real quick, and apparently really silly, really quick. So, yeah, we had one or two other guests who on this show who they were like, this is really kind of the first thing I've done, again, except for like the quick run to the convenience store if you need to, or a doctor visit.
That's literally
and they
all
were like, wow, this is so novel. And we're like looking at each other and it's like, wow, man, you're beautiful.
And I'm not wearing a mask and it's not a Zoom screen or Skype or any of that. I've got hot coffee, which anybody who's listened to Blow Up Radio enough knows that my wife is allergic to coffee. So for the last year I've had no hot coffee because can't brew coffee in the house.
You have there's like a litany of rules before walking in your house. You better come correct if you're coming over Lazlo's house. Don't fuck around. He will throw you right out.
I mean, now nobody's been in the house other than my wife and my mother-in-law and me. My mother-in-law lives with us. But my wife, because she suffers from ankylosing spondylitis and has a lot of different allergies, we've got to be extra careful.
Talk to me about ankylosing spondylitis. You run an annual, or maybe it's more than annual, fundraiser for the National Research Fund, the National Association.
The Spondylitis Association of America.
Spondylitis Association of America. Lazlo runs a benefit at least once a year. So that's because your wife has that illness. And is the, if you could explain a little bit about what it is for the people, but also does that trigger allergies, or is that just a separate thing for her?
It's a separate thing.
Naomi.
Naomi is my wife's name. Yeah, she is so lucky. She married me, and spondylitis started almost immediately when we got back from our honeymoon. So
nice
the
job,
worst
dude.
thing you ever did was marrying me, and we've been married almost 16 years now. Next month it'll be 16 years. But yeah, the allergies are a completely separate thing. But spondylitis, it's complicated, and you can probably find out more by going to spondylitis.org or stopas.org, which is probably easier to spell for those of you who don't know how to spell spondylitis. It took me a year to figure out how to say that word properly. And, Mick Mars from Motley Crue suffers from spondylitis, as does, and I always forget this band name because I don't really listen to them. Believer, a song from about 5-10 years ago. That was a big deal about 5-10 years ago. The guy's still a big deal who has
Imagine Dragons.
Yes, that'd be it.
My son likes that song.
I respect the guy because he is always out there promoting spondylitis, and talking about it. Don't hate his music, but I'm not really a fan of his music. But anyway, what it is that it's a rheumatoid arthritis that causes pain in the ribs and spine and causes fusion of the bone in the spine. A lot of people, when you see them like hunched over, like this, especially when they're older, it's because of the fusion from spondylitis that causes that. So even on the best day, my wife is almost always in pain. So it's fun, as I like to put it. And because it's actually a video thing, I can just do the air quotes and people can see that. Because I
air quote all you want here. You can do anything.
I do it on my radio station all the time, and then I go, I'm doing air quotes right now because you can't see that. Because my station is just radio, audio.
What how do folks with spondylitis, I know it's not curable, is that correct?
It is not curable.
So what are the management strategies?
Basically, it's pain management right now, and there's certain medications that slows down the progression of the disease, but there's nothing that stops it or will heal you from it. So a lot of it is pain management. And when my wife has a really bad flare-up, we have to go to the emergency room to get heavier pain medication than she would have at home. And then some of the time, unfortunately, depending on who the doctor is, they think she's just an addict trying to get painkillers, not understanding the disease. Because even though spondylitis is more well known now than it was 16 years ago, it's still one of those diseases that you don't really hear much about.
No, I only know about it through you and the work that you've done. And yeah, there's in recent years a huge stigma around painkillers. Just because of the epidemic we have in the country and all the shady doctors and salespeople who really pushed these things a little stronger than they needed to. The people who suffer are the folks who actually need these things. Only once have I been on like the really good stuff, and it is some serious medication. I can totally see how someone can get addicted to that stuff. Like it's basically heroin. I remember just sinking into my couch and being like, this is great. I could see being like this for a couple months. Luckily, you have a support system around you. You have goals. You have things you need to get done. You have people who smack you upside the head if you make a few wrong turns. I could see how it's easy to slip into that, and I could also see how people are cautious. But for someone like your wife, are there other management strategies in addition to painkillers?
There's exercise and stretching that she does every day that helps, but you always have to. And she's not on the heaviest painkillers that you're talking about. She's on much lighter ones, normal on a daily basis, and she tries to cut back when she can. She's actually cut back quite a bit from what she's been on previously, and only on a bad day will she take more than that. But it's still within the prescribed limits.
What's happening inside the body? So if we think about the spine, there's bones and cartilage and nerves that go through these areas and vertebrates. What is happening to make them fuse? Is there is it changing the shape of things? Is it closing the gap between things, or are things accumulating like calcium deposits? And what's happening exactly?
I am not a medical expert, and I am not going to be able to answer that question because I don't know the answer and don't want to give bad information.
Okay. Well, I will look that up on the Spondylitis Association of America.
That is correct.
I will visit their website. I'm curious about that. I have some medical folks in my family. My mother, my cousin, my wife is an epidemiologist, and so there's always medical chat flying around me. I understand next to none of it, but I do like to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, which is why I don't like to answer. I'll give the basics on spondylitis, but I'm not a medical professional, and I don't understand enough of it to speak on too great a detail.
Has Naomi, has she taken CBD, concentrated oils?
She is not, and that is largely because back in the 90s, she used to work at the Arts Center. And being around people who were smoking marijuana during concerts made her sick. One of the many allergies she apparently has. So she doesn't want to touch anything related to that because being around, people smoking marijuana has already made her sick.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is an oil derived from the hemp seed.
Oh, I understand completely. She out of an abundance of caution, she doesn't want to do it.
That was the first time I smelled pot was at the Garden State Art Center. She was probably there. What was it? Morrissey. My first rock show, at least by myself with my friends. Maybe I was 14 or 15. We were up on the lawn, which was great back in the day. It's a little militant now. You can't bring anything with you, at least the last few times I've been there. So it wasn't like back in the day. You roll up with a chair, some blankets, freaking cooler, God knows what else. And I was like, that was the first time I smelled pot. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And of course at a Morrissey show. So it was as if it wasn't like sensitive and loving enough. We needed more sensitivity and calm.
Yeah, it's weird to think of people getting stoned at a Morrissey show, but to each their own.
That was a crazy show. It ended. I found out this was like a thing I think he enjoyed or would sort of, egg on, but people like rushing the stage at the end of the concert, like those young men who were just had to have a piece of Morrissey. They're bringing him flowers and all this, and then first it's like one guy. No. And then it's like 5 guys. And then it's just like, it gets hectic and he has to be, taken off the stage by security. And I came to realize it was a little bit of a thing. Not a bad way to go off the stage, to create a little more drama than he had already created with his lyrics and music.
He's known for drama.
He is drama. Morrissey equals drama. I think in the dictionary you'll see a picture of his perfect hair and face next to the word drama.
It's like we're recording this a week after the Simpsons episode aired that parodied him, and when I watched that last weekend, I knew he was going to be pissed about that.
I don't think anything makes him happy. I can't imagine that guy happy.
Yeah, I don't think he ever has been happy.
I haven't watched The Simpsons in forever, and it's not for a lack of respect and love for the show. So what did they do on the show at Morrissey?
Lisa had discovered, like a Spotify thing and found a different guy with a name like Morrissey, who is clearly Morrissey, on there. And then he became her imaginary friend. And if you want me to ruin the ending of the episode...
Yeah, ruin it.
Okay. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it that might want to. At the end of the episode, she goes to a Coachella-type festival to see the one time he's supposed to be coming out to play in like 40 years. And he's a fat, old, angry man who now eats bacon all the time. And of course he got angry. And he was racist also, which he's made some racist statements in recent years. And some sexist ones.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know anything about that. I do remember him being a lifelong vegetarian. I mean,
vegan.
Vegan?
Oh, I'm a vegetarian for 20 some odd years now. God, almost. No, I'm sorry, 30 years now. More than 30 years I've been a vegetarian. But I'm not a militant vegan, and my wife eats meat, so I don't even care the fact that other people eat meat around me. Morrissey, like, if he goes and does a performance or an interview, the places have to go strictly vegan for him to even show up.
I think that's a bit much.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like almost 8 billion people on Earth. I don't think, we need the world to bend to us. I think we need to kind of either bend to the world or just not show up.
Which is why when I always say I'm a vegetarian, I point out immediately my wife is not a vegetarian, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and you're drinking coffee here. She'd be sick to her stomach. You guys, it's quite interesting what you guys got going on.
We're a very unique couple.
She's a sweetheart, Naomi. One of the first tapes I bought of that kind of music was "Meat Is Murder" by the Smiths, which I think famously has "How Soon Is Now," which is probably the biggest Smiths song ever, certainly outside of the UK. That's a killer album. Just even the just the title, "Meat Is Murder," and I think it had like a young child in like a military uniform. Maybe it wasn't even a child. Maybe it was just a young-looking boy a young-looking man. I don't know. Morrissey always had some handsome, young-looking man going on in his artwork. But just the imagery was really stark, and the Meat is Murder. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? What a great band. I loved the Smiths. I mean, I still love the Smiths.
You see, I didn't listen to them much growing up. I think because I had a shit childhood and was pretty depressed during most of my childhood, I think the last thing I wanted to do was listen to something depressing like that.
Oh my gosh, I had to really, I mean, I lived in my head, so anything could have been going on around me, but I had a very stable upbringing. And yeah, I was drawn to all the sort of moody, morose, pained art, all of it. I wanted nothing to do except for Michael Jackson. I was like, who didn't have Thriller back in the day? So
I actually didn't. I listened to it all the time when it came up on the radio, but I did not own that album until when was it? They released like an anniversary edition, and the record label actually sent me a download of it. So I think that's the first time that I've owned that Michael Jackson album.
You were the only person our age who did not own Thriller?
Probably.
How dare you? You owe Quincy Jones an apology. You owe so many people an apology.
The closest thing to Michael Jackson that I know I owned growing up was somebody for my birthday, when I wanted Clash's Combat Rock, bought me Paul McCartney's Pipes of Peace, which had the duet that he did with Michael Jackson, Say, Say, Say.
Not quite combat rock.
No, it was not. And I remember seeing that it was a cassette-sized package and opening it, and I'm like, oh.
Oh, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, as if we needed that to happen. I remember that video. It's got a great hook, good melody, great singers, great artists, two of the best of all time. That didn't need to happen. We didn't need Say, Say, Say.
Every artist at some point does that pop song. It's like somebody was like bad-mouthing The Cure's Friday I'm in Love recently, and I'm like, yeah, but that's just the same as like REM Shiny Happy People or Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson Say, Say, Say. Everybody has that cheesy pop song, and it's not that it's a bad song. It's just an obvious pop song.
I would always skip Shiny Happy People. I'm a huge REM fan. Peter Buck was instructive to my guitar playing. Peter, if by some chance you ever come across this podcast, please, I would love to have you on the show. I would love to pick your brain. You really changed my life. Enough about Peter Buck.
Years ago, I might have been able to make that happen. I knew somebody who was close with REM. I never actually
tease
met
me
them.
like that, dude. You're like, remember back in the day when we probably spoke more and I was actually doing shows?
It was somebody in the local music scene.
God damn it, Lazlo. Well, they make their way up and around. They've got like those oddball side projects. Like they were at the Saint.
The baseball project.
I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, I think that's just what it's called.
Peter Buck's in there, right? Or is it just Mike Mills?
It's both of them. And that used to play at the old Asbury Lanes.
Yeah. So
I don't know if they ever made it to the new Asbury Lanes. I haven't made it to the new Asbury Lanes, and
I've been there a couple times. It's beautiful. It's different. Of course, it's different.
It would have to be.
How could you make something the same? But no, it's cool. It's still cool. Different. I've only been a couple times though. It was a different time too. It's like my younger self. It was like just a different time, a different scene. Maybe at the old lanes or in other things too.
The old lanes was one of those places you're lucky to have at some point in your life where you could just go and feel comfortable in your own skin, even if you don't normally feel comfortable. It's weird that it's only been in the last 10 years after I married my wife, as a matter of fact, that I've started to feel more comfortable in my own skin. So for anybody who's having troubles now, eventually it will get better. It just may not be until you're in your 30s.
Yeah, and you get back from your honeymoon and give your wife a disease. Nice job with that, dude. I can't believe it. Some people come back, impregnated. You, on the other hand, sir, how dare you?
Technically, here's the thing with spondylitis, and not to dwell on spondylitis, but technically she had it when she was a teenager, briefly for a couple of years, and then it disappeared. During those couple of years, because at that time they did not really diagnose spondylitis, they thought it was all in her head. They kept sending her to shrinks.
Oh, wow.
So it was even worse when she had it as a teenager, and then thankfully it went away for a while. Something was a catalyst for it right around the time we got married.
Marrying handsome men, I think, that's a catalyst for.
I have a
for
face
things.
for radio. Nobody ever comes. I do not consider myself a handsome man. I may joke, trying to vogue to I'm too sexy or something once in a while. Because, I'm a goofball.
I'm right there with you, man. Yeah, you talk about the old lanes and the places, where you could just sort of be out of place and in the right place. I mean, that's been Asbury Park for artists and weirdos my entire life. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
it's had its ups and downs, and it's definitely, COVID aside, is in a schmancier phase right now, but that's what the town has meant to me my entire life. Whether it was street corners, desolate parts of town, shady parts of town, or just those funky rock clubs, punk rock clubs. Like where it was sort of like the danger too. There was a lot of danger.
When
People don't realize it now.
I went to Monmouth back in the 90s, so I'd spend a lot of time here in Asbury Park because it was just down the road from where I was going to college. And I don't think I was smart enough to realize how much I was putting myself into danger each time I went here. Because 90s at Asbury Park was not a safe place per se.
I was renting space on Cookman Avenue in the early 90s. And yeah, you always had, if you weren't carrying some kind of weapon, you were foolish. You were just begging.
I was foolish. Heck, I used to go to the Palace Amusements when I was growing up all the time. It crushed me when they demolished that.
And we're really close in age. I think you said your age before, so we're only a couple years apart, you and I. I remember going to the Palace of Amusements for like birthday parties. It was sort of It was sort of falling apart.
It was a shithole dive that was falling apart. I remember when they put the bumper boats in and the water was black because they just never changed it, so you did not want to go into the bumper boats and actually bump.
No,
because you might get hit
boats.
with the water.
It's like acid rain. Your skin just changes color. I remember the bumper cars being super cool.
And they didn't care whether you went in the right direction or not, so you could have head-on collisions in those bumper cars.
I don't know who those
Nobody
young
else
people
would
were
ever
who were
do
running
that.
those rides, but they were not worried about it. Whatever it was, they weren't worried. The teacups,
the fun house, which started with that big spinner thing that you walk past.
Yes, and then there was that sort of what is it?
It was
almost
like a
a
mirror
Chinese
maze
dragon thing too.
The dragon roller coaster thing.
Yes.
It wasn't much of a roller coaster, but
Really
for
wasn't.
an indoor amusement park, it was what it sort of was supposed to be.
It looked cool though. I remember the.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of like, I don't know, like those Chinese New Year parade, whatever the hell those things are called that they put on. They're like so elaborate and so beautiful. It like reminded me of that. So I was like, whoa! Just like it seemed really cool.
I still have the game tokens from the Palace Amusements when you like won on the slot machines and stuff. The little tokens came out.
Of course you do.
I found a whole bunch of them like when I moved from my apartment to the house I live in now, and I'm like, holy shit.
Last time I was in your basement, which was for some on-air show I was doing.
I think it was New Year's Eve. You came for with Tony Tedesco, right?
Yeah, I was doing something with Tony. And shout out to Tony Tedesco, our former collective, the Full Fathom 5. Your basement is a time capsule. I was taking pictures. I don't think I've ever gone in someone's basement and taken pictures. And I was taking pictures. I'm like, holy mackerel. It was a total time capsule. What is that for you? Have you always been that type of guy? Like I don't want to say collector. I feel like you're not as much, and correct me if I'm wrong, less of a collector and more of just a romantic. What is it?
I mean, I own a lot of movies, yes, and some of them I went out and paid full price for. Some of them I've picked up in thrift shops over the years. But yeah, there's something nice about going, having... Everybody likes Netflix and the streaming services, and I'm not against them. I watch them all the time now. But there's something about going, I really want to watch such and such a movie and physically having it. In the same way, there's something nice about having a physical album in your hands, which I get less and less of now. Everything's digital now, and I accept that. It saves on space, I'll say that much, having everything digital these days, because I frankly have no room for albums anymore.
Your shit is packed.
And just before we went on air, my wife texted me. A friend of ours was getting rid of like a whole crate of music, and she's like, yeah, it's in the trunk of the car, but you're going to need to get it out because it's too heavy for me to lift. So apparently I've got a whole bunch of music waiting for me when I get home.
Oh, like actual like vinyl?
Like vinyl and CDs.
Oh, vinyl's heavy as hell. You can't carry more than a short stack.
People
at a time.
have given me so much vinyl, when they've been getting rid of it, and like sometimes they don't realize what they're getting rid of. I was talking to Chris Rockwell a couple of weeks ago on my program, and we were talking about old Beastie Boys, and I'm like, yeah, I've got this vinyl album from the early 80s that was all New York indie bands, and the Beastie Boys, back when they were a punk band, had a song on this, and it's worth a lot of money now. Somebody just gave it to me because they didn't want it anymore.
That's the best. That's what I enjoy now. I'm not a collector. I like certain old stuff. I do enjoy going to yard sales. I'm a total yard sale junkie. My poor family, they know if we're driving in the car and I see a sign, I don't care where we're going. I'm like, we're going there first. Like, and they're like, oh, Dad, come on, man. Because they know I'm not getting them anything. It's just for me. It's totally selfish. And I really enjoy, picking stuff up. But one of the things I've come to also enjoy is kind of digging through and it's like, what's of value? It's kind of like fun. It's like, there's a million ways to make a buck in this world. And I really feel like for certain geeks like us, and there's many of us out there, like you can make a buck, especially right now. It's a real seller's market for a lot of collector items and everything. I mean, that's going to bubble out at some point. But if you've got some stuff that's worth some money, trading cards, other items, memorabilia, now is an excellent time to be selling those things. And I've come across so much, especially in music, like just that funky colored vinyl, like, oh, you have the red vinyl, like of that thing. I came across an old demo, a Tool demo.
Oh, wow.
And I've always been a fan of Tool. I remember in high school, my buddy Alex, shout out to Alex Rystrom, one of my longest friends. I love you. I remember it like first day or early in homeroom, we both knew nobody, and he came through with the headphones. He's like, check this out. He used to sit behind me and he put on, it was Opiate, and I was like, oh my God, what is this? It was heavy as hell. They were super metal then, Tool, and I think I did what I guess a lot of people did back then. There was like fan clubs, so I signed up for a fan club and they sent me their demo. Come to realize this demo's going, like, there's people paying like $500-600 for this demo right now. Sounds like shit too. I've played it a few times, but it's cool. You get like early versions of some of the songs that went on to be huge hits, like Sober. You got to hear the demo version of Sober.
I'd love to hear that, actually.
When we can get together again in a space other than this, I'll play it for you. Or I'll tell you what, $600. It's you own it. What do you think?
Yeah, not happening.
But I'm sure you've come across things that you have that are that you're like, damn, this has got some value. Let me put this in a slightly separate area.
I've got a lot of New Jersey artists, ones that are now much more well known, that I've got early demos from.
It's the best. And cassette is killer right now too, because a lot of bands are putting out cassettes.
Which is the weirdest thing to me, because most of the cassettes I had growing up, because I played them so many times, they're warped and won't even play. I've talked about this before. I was a huge Def Leppard fan as a kid. And Def Leppard's Pyromania, I went through like 6 copies of that cassette because it would snap from being played too much.
Def Leppard was really good. I was never into that kind of music per se, at least not too much. Like I said, I like the real moody stuff, but Def Leppard, like they were like perfect at whatever. I don't know, what do we call that? Sort of, there was little metal, little hard rock, little glam.
Yeah, I mean, they were heavy metal, more in the metal theme when they first started, and then when Hysteria came out, which was their answer to Michael Jackson's Thriller, you may have heard them refer to it that way.
No, I've never heard that.
That's literally the story. When they were in the studio with Mutt Lange, they said, we want to make our like a hard rock version of Thriller.
I think it nails it.
They did. There's like 6 hits on that thing.
Hits galore. They were good.
And then they did, after that, they did Adrenalize and just delved more into trying to be, more pop sounding. And there was like that gradual, at one point in the late 90s, they even did a song with, that I believe the Matrix wrote for them, the boy band writing team that did the music, wrote some of the stuff for NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys and stuff. And that's when I went, dear God, Def Leppard have really, they just want a pop hit that badly now that they're willing to do that.
Well, I'm sure they're not complaining. I mean, they were on top of the world for some time, and they were really good. Good chops, too. I mean, everyone in the band was solid, some real good guitar work. The melodies, obviously, were just solid melodies. It's one thing to be a good player. I mean, you see it all the time, like around us. You have, like, some people are great songwriters, and they're not great players. Some people are great players, but they're not very good songwriters. Some are like, wow, those are amazing lyrics, but I don't know, I can't really stand your voice. And it's rare when all of those things are kind of packaged in one. I've been so fortunate. So many of the players that I've worked with or got to collaborate with, I really felt like they were like total package players. I mean, it's good to have high standards too. I mean, this growing up around Asbury, there was never a shortage of artists or musicians to, I don't want to say choose from, not like, you're okay, next, but you can choose who you want to hang around, who you want to be influenced by, even if you're not able to collaborate. Maybe you're not on their level, but there's always a way to weasel in.
Well, I say this over and over again. I don't think I could do BlowUpRadio.com all about music from one state in a lot of states. There's only a handful, maybe. New Jersey happens to have a really diverse and really eclectic and really interesting, high quality amount of musicians. I mean, I listened to a good 30 albums or 30 pieces of music. Sometimes it's just a single or an EP from just New Jersey acts each week. I don't know that I could do an hour of new music just from New Jersey, from any other state like I do from New Jersey every week.
I've never lived in any other state, so I mean, I could assume that's correct. I can't prove it, but yeah. What is it? What is it about this place?
I think it's something, I don't know exactly what it is, but it doesn't seem to be isolated to just music. Because you think of all the different arts that have come from New Jersey.
Filmmaking.
So many actors and directors that have come from here, and so many artists that have come from here. It just seems like there's something in the water here that creates art. I don't know what it is. I wish I knew.
Where NJ Rock Lives. So your website, your station, your broadcast central point, of which you are the program director of. Tell us, how did you get into radio? Tell us your radio story. So we had, as you know, we had Jeff Raspy on not that long ago. The legend Jeff Raspy, and he got to talk a bit about his path in radio. Could you share yours?
I mean, music has always been a part of my life. A few years ago, I was talking to my aunt and uncle, and they reminded me that even when I was a little kid, when I would get up to their place or to my grandparents' place, I'd say hi, do all the niceties, and then immediately go to the radio and see what radio stations I could find. So apparently music has always been like a thing, even when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I know as I got older, I remember making the mixtapes like so many people of our generation did, but recording my own voice, in between the songs, sort of being a DJ. And then when I got to college, my freshman year of college, when I was going to Philadelphia College of Textile and Science in Philadelphia. I believe it is now Philadelphia University, and I do not recommend that college because I left after a year. But the one good thing that came from it was that a friend of mine was doing the college radio station there, which literally could only be heard on campus. If you went like a mile off campus, you couldn't get the station.
Well,
anymore.
like many college stations. Yeah. The same with the college station at my college as well.
So he was there, and so in October, like a month or so after he had started, I went up there and hung out there with him. And then there was one week he couldn't show up, so I wound up doing it. And I'm like, oh, I like this. This is something I'm going to be doing. And immediately started doing a shift there. And then when I went to Middlesex County College for a year after that, I was doing the radio station there. I mean, literally, it will be 30 years this fall that I've been doing radio in one way or another. Because then when I got to Monmouth, I started doing WMCX there, which I still listen to when I'm down this way.
Yeah, they've got a bit of a further reach.
Yeah, I can't quite get it. I'm in South Amboy, and I'm just, right on the cusp where some days, depending on atmospheric conditions, I might be able to get it in.
That's
but if
kind
I
of
go
shocking
like
to
10,
me.
15 minutes down the road, yeah, I can get it in clearly.
That's shocking to me because, I mean, that's a well-funded school. I mean, they're plugged into some major things. I mean, even just the polling research they do.
I think
how does it work?
Well, I think part of it is they can't go over a certain wattage. I know that because I used to be there Sunday mornings and I had to turn on the wattage, all the broadcast stuff, and make sure that the wattage was within a certain level. And part of that may be that 88.7 is Rutgers station, WRSU in New Brunswick. So there could be bleed through being 88.9 for Monmouth and 88.7 if you go over a certain wattage. This is strictly conjecture on my part, and somebody's listening right now or watching right now going, that's bullshit, man.
No,
that
he
is not
said it,
fact.
and it's true. I don't even know what conjecture means, so fuck that. It's true. So how does that work? I feel like there should be a way around that. Like, it's 2021.
Well, internet. I mean,
Well,
I'm
right,
anywhere.
Right. So maybe by
and
the
if
time...
you've got a smartphone, you can listen to me on a smartphone. You can listen to Blow Up Radio anywhere. That's one of the great things. If you want to listen to WMCX, I guess you can probably listen to them online also now.
That's a good point. That's
so a lot of stations, if you've got internet, Wi-Fi capability, and wherever you are, you can listen to anything anywhere.
So are there limitations? Well, I don't want to interrupt your story. So continue your path on radio.
So while I was at Monmouth, which kind of gets into all of this space, I had gotten to know the band Outcry very well, of which John Liedersdorf was the drummer, who you know very well.
You guys just had a little mushy reunion in our lounge.
He actually knows me by my real name. That's not Lazlo. Lazlo, and I'm going to get to why Lazlo in a few minutes. So while I was still at Monmouth, I started doing an internship at WDHA. I don't normally say the station, but fuck it, I'll say it at this point. I've left there over 20 years. If they got a problem with, which they did, about a year after I left, there was an interview done, sidebar here as we're going off tangent, in the Star Ledger about internet radio, and I talked to the guy for a good half hour, 45 minutes, which is the great thing about this, I'm not being edited. And the one line that was used in the entire interview was that I said, I got tired of working at WDHA and playing Stairway to Heaven all the time, which was really just my wise ass aside, and I should now know better than to just make wise ass asides, because that will be the one pull quote they will grab and not say anything else. And DHA was not happy about me saying that about them.
Understandably.
It was kind of true. Stairway and Freebird came up an awful lot, and goddamn it, I don't know. And Hotel California, songs I never need to hear again in my life.
Speaking of Hotel California, that was always being played at the Palace of Amusements. Do you happen to remember that?
Yeah, I do.
It was always on, and I was like, damn, I can't stand this song. Sorry, Eagles.
Yeah, I don't mind the Eagles, but I never, ever need to hear Hotel California. Even a cover of it, I generally just kind of go,
We're good on that.
Damn it, this friggin' song.
We're good on it.
Same thing with Freebird and Stairway. The only cover of Freebird that I've ever enjoyed in my life is back in the 90s, Fish used to do it completely a cappella. And something about taking the song and putting it into a weird a cappella thing where they even did like the guitar parts just with their mouths was amusing to me. I'm like, okay, at least they've gone off on a different sort of journey with this song.
That's the power of mushrooms, Lazlo.
Which, I guess I should have been doing at those shows.
Maybe.
I remember stepping on somebody who was lying on the ground at a Fish concert and going, oh God, I'm so sorry. And the guy's like, what? Like, I'm so sorry I just stepped on you. He's like, what? I'm like, you have no idea what's going on. All right, man. We're good.
What?
After the second time, I'm just like, I'm going to walk on because eventually you'll realize you're in pain, but I'll be long gone.
How did I get this shoe print on my chest?
I mean, what the hell are you doing lying down in a concert? This was at Waterloo Village, that dirt field up in northern New Jersey that they used to do concerts at all. Yeah, that about sums it up.
Yeah,
it was not a good
it
place
was like
to see a
you had
show.
to take like a walking pilgrimage to get to. Really, it was like, going out into the desert or something. Like, it was always a little rough getting in and out.
And it wasn't a good walk. Like, I went out to Red Rocks once. I don't know if you've ever been out to Red Rocks.
No.
Amazing place to see a show. But literally, because we couldn't find a shuttle bus, my friend and I, we walked up the side of the mountain and into Red Rocks. Now, I was completely out of shape at the time, and it's like a half mile straight up as the oxygen's getting thinner and thinner. But I'm like, half a mile walk shouldn't be so bad. We got to the top, and I'm like, okay, I never want to do that again in my life.
That's when the universe is like, you need to get your shit together. Your ancestors are not proud of you right now.
And I've been asthmatic my whole life, so I'm glad I had my inhaler with me, because I remember going...
I almost died at Red Rocks, but you made it.
But I made it, and because of fan clubs, because it was a Blues Traveler concert, and I was part of their fan club at the time, I was like second or third row, so it was great being like that close at Red Rocks, so like looking behind and seeing the rock pillars on either side and everything. I mean, you've undoubtedly seen Red Rocks, because there are so many concerts that have been filmed there over the years. It's just such an iconic place.
Yeah, of course I've only seen it, secondhand through, the power of video.
Yeah.
But it does seem very special, and I've heard just great things about it, and the few artists I know who have played there, it was a highlight for them in their career.
Yeah, I don't know if Blues Traveler still plays there every 4th of July, but that used to be their thing. And I had finally made it out there, 2001, just before 9/11. I made it out that summer to Red Rocks to witness that event, and it was just incredible. I've never been to a venue quite like that.
No, I would love to make it out there someday. When you were sort of transferring into digital radio, was there some pushback?
Well, what do you mean? When I went to internet radio from DHA?
Yeah, was there some pushback just from, was that widely accepted yet amongst listeners? And then, of course, I'm sure there were technology things that you had to overcome.
I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, when I was at Monmouth, I should point out, I was doing a local music show, in part because, I knew Outcry and a bunch of other bands from the local music scene. Ironically, and this is something I hadn't even thought about until the other day when I realized I might run into John Liedersdorf. When I knew Outcry back in the day, I did their internet promotion back in 1994, 95, whenever their Wentworth EP came out. And this is like pre-HTML, but I had access to computers at Monmouth and knew enough about the internet. And basically, I was spamming people back then, trying to promote Outcry's music.
That's what it was back then. I remember, so maybe like a year or two after that, I was in college. And yeah, using the internet was something that you futzed around with in the computer lab at your college. And I was in a band, and we were doing pretty well at the time, too. And we had a guy who... We had like a posse. We always had a posse around us, and he's like, "Oh, I'll do some internet stuff for you guys. I'll get a website together, get of this and that." And I'm like, "Okay." It doesn't sound bad, but I had no concept of it. It's amazing that all the infrastructure was there, and it just was like this organic, slow discovery by people. It's pretty funny.
Yeah,
what were you doing at when you say spamming people? So what did that consist of back in the early mid 90s with an internet that most people didn't even have access to?
It really meant to what there was back then. I think it was called user groups, and it was a lot of just like old bulletin boards where people talked about bands and stuff. And I would find bands that in some way or other, I thought their fan base might be related to Outcry, like U2 or the Police or something like that. and would say, hey, there's this great band from New Jersey and you can check them out. And like, if you want to buy their EP, here's a P.O. box, send a check or money order. It was like the weirdest thing. I'm like, my God, I think back on that now. I'm like, I was completely spamming people.
Well, thanks for starting that revolution. A day doesn't go by that people are blowing up the recording studio's social media pages. Like, hey, I think you want to invest in it. You should check this out. I'm like, fuck you. Please stop. There's better ways. I mean, you could at least spend a moment to send a real message. You could spend a moment.
I got a spam email just the other day that I actually went on to Twitter to start talking about, where they wanted to franchise Blow Up Radio. I'm like, what would that even look like? How do you franchise an internet station about New Jersey music?
Yes. Well, New Jersey is very popular. People all over the world love it. That's hysterical.
It was the weirdest thing.
What? I know there's tons of regulation. There's tons of government regulation around radio. And that's the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC.
The FCC. Although technically the FCC, I mean, they do with like the Internet Act or whatever. There's an Internet Radio Act. But as far as like, expletives, they don't monitor Internet radio for that, which is why we're not FCC regulated in that regard on Blow Up Radio, and I curse like a sailor sometimes.
You do. That's true.
I've done it in this interview.
I learned it by listening to you.
I learned it from you, man.
That was one of the best commercials of all time. If you're too young, I'm sure you're younger than us. It's hard not to be. But just a great commercial, parents. I mean, we probably shouldn't be laughing about this, but let's just laugh about it. Come on. What else are you going to do in this short, weird life that we have where we're constantly searching for meaning? I find meaning in having a good laugh about shit. And the parents, they find the stash. They find the young boy's stash. And they're like, oh, it's the classic wooden box. I personally have a wooden box, so like I totally connected with that. And he's just like, what is this? Who taught you how to do this? And he's like, you, Dad. I learned it by watching you. And it's one of the greatest commercials of all time.
It's not quite as classic as the Brain on Drugs commercial, which was even more prevalent at the time.
I think it's better, right, though. I think it's better, though. Like the fried egg, I mean, that's easy to make fun of. And I think it was so like the image, but like as far as like the conversational tone between the dad and the son, my dad was super straight-laced. And if he wasn't, I'll never know. He'll go to the grave with all his secrets, but I'm pretty sure he was a super straight-laced guy, as was my mom. And so I would always just think about like, oh my God, like I'm trying to picture my dad like doing drugs and me like, he smoked a lot of cigarettes, so I would nab cigarettes from him. But I think that's different. And then, but then when I got to like high school and then like, you started to meet like the parents who partied with your friends and you're like, all right, I'm connecting now on a different level with that commercial. I learned it by watching you. And can we hang out now? Yes. That was a great commercial. How did we even get on that commercial? I wanted to talk about the FCC. How did this happen?
Something led to me saying I learned it from you about cursing.
Yes.
FCC, no cursing.
Yes. Oh, man.
You see, the other thing that happens when you get older is you forget where you got to that point. Because we haven't fully gotten to the radio conversation yet, but we'll get there.
I think it's because we're getting older and more wise, we're able to connect to various things at the same time. I don't see it as a limitation, sir. I see it as expanding our web of possibilities.
Now that sounds like drug talk.
It might be. It might be some drug talk. What are the back to the FCC and radio? Are you what are the regulation constraints? Do you have constraints on your ability to operate broadcasting music, your own programming, your own content, broadcasting the content of others on the internet? Are you regulated in any way? Like, do you have to pay? Like, how does it
Well,
work?
royalties are paid and always have been, but in like 2005 or 2006, when whatever the Internet Radio Royalty Act, there was a whole thing that passed through Congress and got signed into law back around that period of time that raised the rates on the royalties. Internet radio actually pays more in royalties than regular radio does. And we also have limitations. We're only allowed to play one song from an artist every 90 minutes or something.
So let's slow down. The government regulates you. You have to pay the government. You're paying the government the royalties, or to the artists?
We're paying. I pay Live 365, which hosts my internet stream. They pay Sound Exchange, which sort of works as the entity that sends it out to ASCAP, BMI, and all the different things that hopefully eventually get to the individual artists. The unfortunate thing is that most of the artists I'm playing, being local indie artists, either aren't registered with ASCAP, BMI, or aren't actually seeing the royalties, because the royalties go to the bigger name artists like Taylor Swift and things like that instead of getting to
This
them.
is a racket.
So it's unfortunate that in the 20 some years that I've been doing Blow Up Radio, and I've asked musicians over the year if they've gotten it, only a handful have ever said they've made money, even though I play a lot of these artists very frequently.
I'm going to ask you this directly. Do you owe me money?
I don't owe you any. I don't owe anybody any money because
now that I got you in an isolated room.
I pay Live 365, and Live 365 does pay out royalties.
Damn it. All right, fine.
Your argument is with Sound Exchange and ASCAP and BMI and
so it's such a racket,
whatever,
dude.
all that's
You get charged. So you're playing the music, which is bringing you, at least from the artists, no money. Like, the artists aren't paying you to play their stuff. There's not some
I don't make money off of doing Blow Up Radio.
Right, so
I
you have
spend money to pay to keep the station and the internet thing, and I fork out a lot of money each year, but it's a hobby.
I know you do. I know you do. So you have to pay the federal government. So they get the first cut.
Well, no. I pay Live 365, which is a business.
Okay, so the private
and they host
entity,
internet radio streams.
But they certainly have to. They probably pay it.
They're paying to Sound Exchange, which is not a government entity, but is regulated by the Government Act. That all the ASCAP, BMI, and I may be slightly misrepresenting things, and I apologize if I am. But this is my best understanding from reading this stuff over the years. Because at a certain point, I'm just like, well, as long as Live 365 is paying who they need to pay, and I know everything's legal, I don't need to know all the down and dirty stuff. I'd rather put my energies elsewhere.
It's just kind of confusing to me. Do you think it's a smart model?
No, honestly, I think it's unfortunate. That just like with Spotify, you're getting 1/100th of a penny for every million plays or whatever the heck it is, or any of the other streaming.
I'm coming
things.
in at around 37 cents.
There you go.
In the last year, so I'm starting to feel it. I'm starting to get the income going.
I remember years ago talking to Brian Vander Ark from the Verve Pipe, and he's like, "Yeah, if I'm lucky, the royalties on the Freshman pay my cable bill." It's like, if I'm lucky.
That's incredible.
And you know how big the Freshman was, and it still gets played on radio and still gets streamed.
That was a big hit. That was a big sensitive hit back in the day.
Yeah.
So let's play We're in Charge of the World. What is another potential model? I'm sure that you've thought about this.
I haven't thought about it too much. I think it's unfortunate that the artist almost always gets screwed in any of these. I mean, in some cases, the internet station does too. The reason why Live 365, because I was off the air as an internet station for a year when they went out of business, had to do with the royalties just getting to be too much for them to afford to be. When I first started doing Blow Up Radio, a story I haven't gotten to yet because we keep going off on tangents, it was free to actually set up an internet radio station. So it didn't cost me anything to start Blow Up Radio as an internet station. When I set up the website, it cost a little bit to set up the website. But the actual internet station was all paid for by advertising. Now, there's still advertising on my station through Live 365 that I have no control over, but that only covers a portion. I'm still paying I'm not going to say the exact amount I'm paying, but it's way more expensive than it was.
So Live 365, you're paying them. They're also in control of the advertising that's on your station, so they're also pulling in that money too.
Right.
And you don't know the fine print of how then they distribute to the artists.
I know that they paid royalties through Sound Exchange and Sound Exchange to ASCAP BMI, because that's the way to the best of my knowledge, that's the way the law is written. And I know that everything is above board and that they are paying the royalties out. But I know that the artists, even when it's Spotify and YouTube and all that, the artists always get screwed. Especially if you're a Taylor Swift, and I don't mean to just harp on Taylor Swift. I got nothing against Taylor Swift making money. She's put out music that is obviously very popular, and she deserves to make money off of that. But she's also got a legal team and a lot of people to make sure that she gets the money, whereas the local artists I'm playing, for the most part, do not. And don't have any power in this whole thing. And I don't know that there's a way to fix that. I'm sure smarter people than I would know how to fix that. But I think that generally those who don't have power, which would be those with no money, are the ones who are going to get screwed. It's just the way of the world, unfortunately.
I mean, why do you even need a Live 365, really? I mean, I put this show goes up on YouTube for free. People can watch it for free. Why does the internet radio model even need a middleman?
Well, if I was to do a radio stream through YouTube, technically I would have to get permission from all the different artists to use their music. Like if I was tried to create a podcast of just music, technically speaking, and I know there are podcasts out there that do not do that, I'd have to get all the artists I want to play to sign a waiver saying, you waived the right to royalties for this particular podcast.
I got you.
And I did that briefly, like 15 years ago. I don't know, a long time ago.
I signed something from you once.
I did try to do a podcast for a little while.
I remember this. I feel like
but there
were
only about 20 or 30 artists that signed off on it, and it doesn't make for a very compelling podcast to keep playing the same 20 to 30 artists when I play hundreds of artists on the regular station. You could probably listen for 24 hours to BlowUpRadio.com and not necessarily hear the same artists come up, because there's just that many artists in the rotation.
I understand. It's tricky. I see. It's trickier than I thought. You've educated me a bit on this. I appreciate that. Thank you. I was definitely coming from an ignorant place on it, but it still feels
I don't know. Ignorance makes it sound like, uneducated. Ignorant always sounds like a much more negative term. I don't like to use that term unless somebody's really being an ass. Whereas I think most of us are. Whereas I think most people are uneducated until somebody explains it to them.
Well, that's what ignorant means. You just don't like the vibe of it.
Yeah, I just think ignorant, and like ignoramus is generally a negative term.
I am not an ignoramus. That's funny. All right, so I just didn't know. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah. You
have helped me know more. And certainly I do. It does feel like there could be a smarter model out there, but
I'm sure. I mean, the year that I was off air, I used, and I can't remember the name of the program now, but it was a completely legal thing where it pulled, it created a playlist that you could listen to. And I could pull in links of songs from SoundCloud and YouTube and Bandcamp and stuff like that and create a mix of songs. And I would do that every week. And I, put my own DJing stuff up onto SoundCloud and then mix those in. So every 3 or 4 songs I would talk in between. So it was sort of like listening to the radio station, but it wasn't the radio station.
That's interesting. I might have to talk to you about that, because I need to get this, and Taylor's been telling me this since day one, and others have now chimed in the chorus. I need to get this podcast in an audio format.
That's easy. You just turn it into a WAV or MP3 and post it on Bandcamp or SoundCloud or wherever it is. But then you don't get to see my lovely face.
You are missing out, folks. If you're listening to this on audio, you have this face has done so much good and caused some harm, we've learned. as well in this podcast.
I literally have the face for radio. Literally.
I might be right next to you with that. So tell us about Blow Up Radio. When did you just go full bore creating your own thing? I think it's a killer name too, by the way, Blow Up Radio.
Which was a happy accident, to be honest.
How so?
Well, when I was working at DHA, I was just doing part-time shifts. So I was like on the weekends at like late night hours and doing fill-in shifts and stuff. And eventually you get tired. This was at the time that Creed was just beginning to start big. And no offense against you if you like Creed. I can't stand Creed, so I had to play them a lot. A bunch of other bands that I just did not like. So I got more and more tired about it. And I'm like, I really want to do something with local music like I did back when I was at Monmouth at WMCX. DHA was not interested in that. They played one song at like 7:30 every night, and that was it. You know, is their local music spotlight or some name like that it was referred to. So I was friends with John Liedersdorf from Outcry, who had then started a band called Blow Up, who had just put out their debut album. And honestly, I think it might have just been called Blow Up. I forget for certain what the name of the album is now. Sorry, John, if you're nearby in the building and want to yell it into the room now. But he was saying how hard it was to promote his band. So I'm like, well, let me set up this radio stream and it'll, I'll put a bunch of your music out there, because there was no YouTube at the time. There was no Spotify. There was nothing like that in, December of 2000 was when I started BlowUpRadio.com. So I had found Live 365 through, of all things, I was mentioning being part of the Blues Traveler fan club back then, a whole group of Blues Traveler fans who had put a bunch of Blues Traveler bootlegs up on Live 365. So I had found out about that from them and checked the thing out, and I'm like, I can do this. It's so easy, even a caveman can do it, to use another old ad campaign. And it was free at the time. So I started it. I put, all the tracks from Blow Up, but to be legal at that time, this is before the rule where you could only play like one song every 90 minutes. Yeah. I had to put like 6 artists in there. So I'd put Outcry in there as old band. I know there was some Mr. Reality in there, which was a band that had been signed to SBK Records in the early 90s. It was a great band. Funny thing about that, they were a band from New Jersey. There were a bunch of acts signed to SBK Records back in the early 90s when they first started. There was Wilson Phillips, Vanilla Ice, and Mr. Reality.
Yes.
2 of the 3 you've heard of, and unfortunately the third one, which was the best of the 3, you've probably never heard of unless you've listened to me play them on Blow Up Radio or are lucky enough to be part of the music scene here in New Jersey.
I remember those
in the
guys.
Early 90s.
Yeah, I remember that.
I remember playing Evelyn Forever back then, who were a huge band in the late 90s, early 2000s. Can't remember who else was in there now. There were a bunch of other acts. I know there were some acts from the 90s that I threw in there. I know I had the what was it called? The Imperative Collection, which was a CD with various artists from the 90s. So like Well of Souls was on. And, oh God, I wish I could remember.
Well of Souls, shout out to John
now.
Pfeiffer.
You see, this is, and I talk about this a lot, the internet has made me stupider because I know I can just Google things now. So when my brain decides I don't remember shit anymore, I just Google the Imperative Collection album, or I look at it on my wall.
Maybe if we do this again, I have a little, like a laptop next to you.
There you go.
And you can just sort of be in your zone. We could have it off camera. No one will know. They'll just hear the clicking.
Because I don't even own a smartphone, folks. I've still got an old flip phone because I like to actually disconnect from the internet when I'm out in the real world. And I'm afraid that you always see the people back when we had concerts before the pandemic, like sitting there scrolling through their phones when there's a band playing like 5 feet away from you. I don't ever want to be that person. So I've never gotten a smartphone because I'm afraid I'd become that person.
I think you could be any person you want to be. You could be anyone you want, kids.
Yeah, but I know I've got an internet addiction because when I'm at home, I'm generally looking at a computer screen.
You don't trust yourself is what it is.
And that's, yeah. Some people have an addiction to alcohol or drugs or stuff like that. My addiction is to the internet. I know if I have it in my thing, I'd be checking email or checking to see Because I actually search for new artists all the time from New Jersey. I'm always looking for them on Bandcamp to see who's tagged their music New Jersey, who has put out new music this week. And that's how I find a lot of new music each week. People can reach out to me, and I'd love for people to reach out to me.
That's what I wanted to bring that up right now. What's the best way? So we know that listeners can go to BlowUpRadio.com or WhereNJRockLives.com. But how does an artist connect with you? Let's say I'm releasing a song and I would like you to consider it for your programming or just to make a connection with you. What's the best way for an artist to do that?
Email is still the best way. Lazlo, Lazlo, at BlowUpRadio.com. And if you want to email me a link to download the song, or if it's just one song, you could put it in the email if you want. I mean, I know this is a digital era. I don't expect to get physical copies anymore. It costs a lot of money for people to send physical copies.
Jeff Raspy's old school.
I know. I heard his.
Did you hear
him
my
on
interview
here,
with
and
him?
he
He's
still
like,
prefers it.
I much prefer a CD. I got some feedback on that. People are like, really? I'm like, that's what the man said. I assume he's telling the truth.
And that's fine. I accept the fact that, that's not the world we live in anymore. And in some ways, it's easier because ultimately, I need to have it in an MP3 format to broadcast on my station.
Whereas he needs a wave, and wave is for those who don't know, wave is a much larger file. The average listener cannot hear the difference between an MP3 and a wave, so you're getting really splitting hairs from a listening perspective. But yeah, Jeff needs wave, and it's sending them, you need a third-party transfer site. So I can see it being a drag. All those third-party transfer sites expire at some point. So it's like, I sent it to you 2 weeks ago. Yeah, the link just expired 10 hours ago. We deal with it here all the time at the studio. I'm constantly in transfer hell with things. So I could see him just being like, hey, send it once on a CD. I've got the waves there. I can stick it in a location. It's not going to expire. Yeah, I could see it.
A friend of mine out in California in a band that's about to put an album out called Big Mother Gig. Great band. It's funny, the only band I've name checked today is from California so far.
Big Mother
Gig. Great band who are about to put out an album in just a few weeks. And he sent out the press release to a bunch of us this week, and it was a Dropbox link. And I went and grabbed it immediately. A couple hours later, he emailed me personally. He's like, here's a new link, just in case you didn't get it already, because Dropbox locked us because too many people tried to grab it. I'm like, nope, I was one of the people who got in before they locked it.
Yeah, maybe a smart business to go into, folks out there. I'm just thinking of this now. Is really large file transfer world. There's a few companies that have it on lockdown, but maybe there's a whole nother way. I don't know what that would be. Just throwing things out.
There are PR sites that have their own services for doing it. I was talking on the internet the other day, and again, I'm going to name check a much more well-known band now, that I was surprised that on one of the PR websites where I download music, the whole Wallflowers album that doesn't even come out until July went up. And I'm like, somebody's going to get fired for putting that up 2 months in advance. Well, apparently not. Apparently they meant to put that up 2 months in advance, which is insane that radio gets to place a whole album that far in advance.
Well, I think everyone's desperate for promotion, and everything is flooded all the time. I would assume any oops.
Yeah, but usually because then that whole album can link onto the internet and people can illegally download the entire album 2 months before it's out.
Yeah.
Most people are very careful. You don't get the album until like the day before it's actually released usually. You'll get singles, but you won't get the entire album until like a day or two before. Sometimes the day of. Like I got Paul McCartney's Reimagined 3 the day it came out a week or two ago. I'm name checking all these big name artists. I swear 98% of what I play is New Jersey indie art.
Better than his work with Michael Jackson? Say. How would you rate?
It's funny. The Roman numeral 3 album that had come out the end of last year, I think, or maybe it was early this year, I liked a lot. The reimagined version is very hit and miss because, depending on who reimagined it, they did it in ways that aren't necessarily my cup of tea. Some of them I like a lot, and some of them I don't.
Of imagining.
Yeah.
I guess. Lazlo, I I really appreciate you taking time to come on the show today. Folks, if you have not checked out BlowUpRadio.com or WhereNJRockLives.com, they're the same thing. Give a listen to his show. He plays, even though we name check no New Jersey people today, shame on us, that's his gig. He is a staunch promoter of local music. By local, I mean New Jersey, and he's been doing it for a very long time. You've been
over
in the
20
game,
years,
and you're the real deal, man. I respect what you do. I appreciate what you do. It's been a pleasure to know you over the years. We've done 101 things together. I'm happy to now add another thing that we've done together. I had no idea that you stole the name Blow Up Radio from my boss, so you owe him.
Yes, that is the story to how it got Blow Up Radio.
You could add
and
to
then
your payments list, John, each month. He'll be expecting that check. So if you're an artist out there, a local artist, a New Jersey artist, please drop a line to Lazlo. He'd be happy to consider you and your music. Give a listen to his show. And if you're listening to this show, thanks. Lazlo, appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, brother. That's our show. Have a great day. Thank you.